Welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nourish Child Podcast. I'm Jill, your host, and today we're diving into a topic that's been bubbling up in parent forums and even pediatrician offices. We're talking about goat milk-based infant formula today. Parents are increasingly curious about it as an alternative to traditional cow milk-based formulas. What's driving this curiosity, and is it truly different? Who's it for? We are here to answer those questions and more. This episode of the Nourish Child Podcast is brought to you by Cabrita, and you can learn more about their goat milk-based infant formula at cabrita.com. And joining me today for a repeat appearance is my friend and colleague, Melina Malkani. She's a pediatric dietitian and the author of the books Simple and Safe Baby-Led Weaning and Safe and Simple Food Allergy Prevention. And she's medical advisor for Cabrita. Melina, thank you so much for coming back on the show and for joining us.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are so welcome. Before we get diving into this very packed podcast episode, can you give us some background about the work that you do and any disclosures before we begin our conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm a pediatric dietitian, but I'm actually also a mom of three girls who were all born within about 3.5 years of each other. And they're older now. But back 15 years ago, when the first was born, and then the other two came in quick succession, we experienced kind of the gamut of feeding related issues. And it was hard. I found feeding, even as a dietitian, very challenging in those early years. And so, what I've tried to do is create a private practice and a platform and a kind of personal brand that creates the resources that I wish that I had had at that point that I feel would have helped me. I specialize in starting solids, baby-led weaning, food allergies, food allergy prevention. And as you mentioned, I'm a medical advisor for Cabrita, goat milk-based infant formula, and I'm here today on their behalf.
Wonderful. So let's start at the beginning. What exactly is goat milk-based infant formula, and why are parents expressing more interest in it as an option for their babies?
Yeah, well, goat milk-based infant formula is essentially infant formula that uses goat milk as a base, as opposed to the more common cow milk, which we see usually in infant formula. And for a long time in the US, cow milk-based formulas have been the standard. But in recent years, there's been this growing interest in goat milk-based infant formulas, fueled by a lot of different things. First of all, by new research, also by a desire among parents for alternative options, especially for the babies who may have trouble with digesting cow milk proteins.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, what I am really excited about is that the research supports goat milk based infant formula as not only safe and appropriate as a breast milk alternative, but also potentially easier for some babies to digest.
Mhm.
In fact, some studies suggest that goat milk based infant formula may reduce some of the common infant feeding related symptoms that we see a lot that are really hard for parents to manage, like colic and gas and constipation. Um, and I know as a parent, I was very understandably eager to address these things. So I think other parents are as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that there's so much research behind it. One of the things about infant formula is that it goes through quite a stringent um, approval process by our government. So, from a regulatory standpoint, how does goat milk based infant formula compare to cow's milk based infant formula? And is it held to the same nutritional standards?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because there are some misconceptions around this area. But yes, goat milk based infant formulas, just like cow milk based infant formulas, are held to those same strict nutritional standards here in the US. both the FDA and the American Academy of Pediatrics recognize goat milk-based infant formula as an appropriate and safe option for infant nutrition from birth onwards, so for
Mhm.
newborns as well. Um, and in fact, in the US, all infant formulas that go through that stringent FDA review, whether they're made from cow milk or goat milk, are required to meet really specific nutrient guidelines to ensure they provide that right balance of proteins and fats and carbohydrates and vitamins and minerals for healthy growth and brain development. But what sets Cabrita apart is that it's the only European and goat milk based infant formula that has been FDA reviewed and approved for the US market, which means that unlike other goat milk based infant formulas that are temporarily allowed to be sold here through October of this year as a result of the enforcement discretion, Cabrita is guaranteed to stay here in the US. And then also, because it's produced in Europe, it also meets the European Union's high standards for infant formula. So it's just that extra layer of reassurance that parents can feel confident about that Cabrita meets both US and EU regulations.
Can you dive into, I'm not sure what you called it, but discretion something?
Enforcement discretion.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great question because it has changed the way some infant formulas are sold and available here in the US. So we all remember the infant formula shortage from a few
Hmm.
years ago. And in an effort to try and alleviate some of the shortage, the government allowed some formulas from Europe that don't necessarily meet FDA requirements for nutrients because Europe and the US follow slightly different regulations with the
Hmm.
same goal in mind of providing, nutrition that is going to provide healthy growth and development for all infants, but they have some slight differences. And so
Hmm.
during that formula shortage, through enforcement discretion, the FDA allowed formulas from abroad to be sold here, but only for a short period of time, for a temporary period of time, and that's going to be the deadline for that is coming up in October of this year. So
Okay.
for goat milk based infant formulas that have not yet been FDA reviewed, there's no guarantee that they will be sold here or be allowed to be sold here beyond October of this
Hmm.
year.
Okay, that's so. Thank you so much for summarizing that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure a lot of parents who are out there that's a piece of information that they may not have known. Um, so let's get into the science behind goat milk based infant formula, and this is going to get a little nerdy for you listeners out there, but I think it's important to understand what the components of goat milk based infant formula are and how these things might impact digestion uh, specifically. So, you had mentioned earlier colic and gassiness, and this a lot of parents hear that goat milk formula is easier to digest. So, can you break down the actual compositional differences? We can go through protein, we can go through the carbohydrate components, and sort of help us sort that out. What are the differences between goat milk based infant formula and cow milk based infant formula?
Yeah, it's such an important question, especially with regard to the protein structure, because the protein structure of formula it just plays a big role in how well babies will digest it and tolerate it. And it can be confusing because goat milk and cow milk contain similar amounts of total protein, but the composition of that protein in goat milk is naturally closer to that of breast milk.
Mhm.
Both types of milk contain two main proteins, which your audience has probably heard a lot of. We know about whey and we know about casein. But the specific makeup of these proteins in goat milk can make it easier for some babies to digest. And I'm going to get pretty sciencey here, so bear with me, like you mentioned. Um, so the whey proteins in goat milk, especially the beta lactoglobulins, break down more easily than those in cow milk. And in fact, there's been really interesting digestion studies that have shown that after 2 hours of drinking both breast milk and goat milk based infant formula and cow milk based infant formula, The babies that drank goat milk-based infant formula had about 50% digested. Same goes for breast milk. And then cow milk infant formula lags behind at about 35%.
Hmm.
And then the casein portion is also really unique. Goat milk has lower levels of a type of casein called alpha S1 casein. And
Mhm.
because of that, it produces these softer, looser curds in the stomach that are easier for babies to break down during digestion. And we got to see this in action in a really exciting experiment that we did in the Netherlands recently when I went there with Cabrita to learn more about goat milk and visit their goat farms. But goat milk based infant formula also contains higher levels of beta casein, which is similar to what's found in breast milk. And this is something that many parents may not realize. Within beta caseins, there's two major variants. You have your A1 and your A2. Your audience has probably heard of A2 milk, which
Yeah.
is marketed for easier digestion. I'm sure you've talked about this on your podcast. And goat milk, like human breast milk, naturally contains mostly A2 beta caseins and very little to no A1, which is great because it's the A1 beta caseins that are thought to potentially contribute to digestive discomfort in some people when consumed in cow milk.
Mhm.
So, bottom line with protein, because with goat milk proteins, they're smaller, they're gentler, they're more similar to those found in breast milk. They may be easier for babies to digest, particularly those who are sensitive to the proteins in cow milk based formulas.
Mhm. Yeah. That's really good and important information. I think that many, and you've probably heard this too as a pediatric dietitian, those first 4 months, colic is very common. Um, and to be able to have some science that supports a reduction in colic during that phase is really interesting and promising because some babies really struggle with that.
And families too. It's
Yeah,
it's hard. It's
yeah,
really hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What about oligosaccharides? Tell the audience what they are
Yeah.
and how they are beneficial and present within the goat milk based infant formula.
Yeah, we'll get sciencey again. I
Yes.
promise we won't stay this way the whole time. But yeah, oligosaccharides are really interesting and important part of infant nutrition because they act as prebiotics, feeding those friendly bacteria in the gut and supporting healthy digestion and even immune development. And interestingly, in breast milk, human milk oligosaccharides are actually the third most abundant component after lactose and fat. And there's like over 200 different types of them, and they really do help shape the baby's gut and immune system. But what's unique about goat milk is that it naturally contains several oligosaccharides that are structurally identical to those found in human milk. And in fact, goat milk has one of the highest natural levels of oligosaccharides among all domesticated animals, which I found fascinating. About 5 times more than cow milk, which also may partly explain why goat milk is often considered to be easier to digest.
Hmm.
And then, so that's just goat milk in general, but Cabrita builds on this in addition to the goat milk oligosaccharides by adding galacto oligosaccharides, which are these really well researched prebiotics that function much like the oligosaccharides in breast milk. And GOS has been shown to promote beneficial gut bacteria and support immune health and help improve stool consistency in infants. So there's lots of different potential benefits to those as well.
Hmm. Very interesting. And the conversation wouldn't be complete unless we talked about fat. We've talked about protein, we've talked about carbohydrate. Fat is highly needed during the infant period. It's the content of calories. So the calorie composition of the diet is about 50% fat in that first year, the first 6 months for sure. And then we're around 40 to 45% of the calories from fat. And so the fat content of goat milk based infant formula, can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the fat blend. It needs to be a blend in infant formula
Hmm.
because there is no one plant oil that can provide everything that a baby needs in terms of fat. And it is part also of what makes the infant formula digestible and some of those fat soluble vitamins for the baby to be able to absorb them. So it's super important. When it comes to fat globule size and distribution, goat milk in general has naturally smaller fat globules
Hmm.
and then more of the short and medium chain fatty acids than cow milk, which may also support easier digestion and like a faster availability of the energy that's in the fat for growing babies.
Hmm.
Um, and like all formulas, goat milk based infant formulas use a vegetable oil blend to help mimic that fatty acid profile of breast milk. Since again, there's no one plant or animal oil that can match breast milk on its own. Um, Cabrita's fat blend is really interesting because it's designed to resemble human milk as closely as possible, which is key for all of that digestion and absorption and growth. And there's this one standout component, which I'm really excited about, and it's the inclusion of something called SN2 palmitic acid, sometimes referred to as OPO.
Hmm.
And it matters because in breast milk, palmitic acid exists, and about 70% of it is in that SN2 position on the fat molecule. And that's a structure that just it makes it easier for babies to digest and absorb that wonderful fat and calcium. And it also has been shown to support bone strength and improve stool consistency, and even, and this is a note for parents, even reduce crying time by promoting a healthy gut environment. So lots of potential benefits there. Um, to my knowledge, Cabrita is the only infant formula in the US that's including SN2 palmitic acid at levels that are similar to that of breast milk.
Mm.
It's used widely in Europe and in Asia, but it's just gaining excitement and traction here. So that's
Great.
really exciting. But then Cabrita also, and many other infant formulas as well in the US, include plant based DHA and ARA,
Hmm.
which are two long chain polyunsaturated fats that are really important for brain and eye development
Hmm.
as long as nervous system growth. And because goat and cow milk, they don't naturally contain enough to meet an infant's needs. This is a nutrient that is required in EU standards and regulations and infant
Hmm.
formulas there. We don't have a federal mandate for it yet
Hmm.
here in the US. Um, but it's not just the inclusion of these fats that's important, it's also the ratio. And Cabrita is careful to maintain a 1-to-1 ratio of DHA to ARA
Hmm.
because that matches the scientific recommendations. And it just helps make sure that neither one of these crucial fats is suppressing the function of the other.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I'm hearing a lot of easier digestibility. And I love that there's DHA in there. I'm a big fan of DHA. Okay, let's talk about some myths and misconceptions about goat milk and in general. So, goat milk for children. I did a YouTube video on goat milk for children, and of course, you always get these funny little comments from people. And somebody said, "Of course, goat milk is good for us. We've been drinking it for centuries." But when we think about goat milk for children, which is a different product than what we're talking about here today, goat milk based infant formula, they're two different things. Can you outline the difference between the two for us?
Yeah, common source of confusion, not just for parents too, in my experience, but for some healthcare providers too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to know that plain goat milk and goat milk based infant formula, like you mentioned, they are not the same thing. For some reason, I feel it seems to be easier for people to grasp that plain cow milk is not appropriate for infants under 12 months. But the same goes for plain goat milk. It just simply does not provide the right balance. And we talked about the different nutrients that are in infant formula and the balance of those. Plain goat milk and plain cow milk both don't provide that balance of nutrients that babies need in that critical first year.
Hmm.
Iron and folate are two of them. They're essential for growth and development. And giving plain goat milk or plain cow milk to infants can increase the risk of nutrient deficiencies like anemia, and run the risk of not giving them the nutrition they need to thrive. On the other hand, goat milk based infant formula, like cow milk based infant formula, is carefully modified to meet all of an infant's nutritional needs, like optimal amounts of iron and folate, the vitamins, the minerals, the fat, the protein to support healthy growth. Um, Interestingly, and I heard this recently from a pediatrician, I think part of the lingering concern around goat milk based infant formula may come from the fact that in their pediatric training, many doctors are taught really clearly that plain goat milk can cause anemia in babies. And I think
Mm.
it's a question even on one of their standardized tests. So the
Oh,
message like sticks in the brain,
yes.
know.
Yeah.
But it does not apply to goat milk based infant formulas, which are nutritionally complete and appropriate for infants, including newborns.
Yes. Great. So another like misconception or myth are some of these specific situations that parents can face. So if a baby has a diagnosed cow milk protein allergy or a severe intolerance, is goat milk based infant formula a suitable alternative?
Gosh, I hear you say this on your podcast all the time. And so but I'm going to say it because it's true. Like so much in pediatric nutrition, the answer really depends.
Yeah.
And it depends in this case on specifically on the type of cow milk protein allergy or CMPA that a baby may have.
Mhm.
Um, for babies with IgE mediated cow milk protein allergy, then this is the kind of allergy that can cause the immediate, potentially severe reactions like hives or vomiting or anaphylaxis. Goat milk based infant formula is not a safe option. And that's because, we talked about some of the differences between goat milk proteins and cow milk proteins, but they are similar enough to be able to trigger a similar immune response. And in these cases, if a baby has this kind of an allergy, the recommendation is to look to an extensively hydrolyzed or an amino acid based formula
Mhm.
as a recommended alternative. But this is fascinating to me, and it's an area of emerging research, and we do need more about it. But for babies with non IgE mediated CMPA, which is the type that usually causes your delayed reactions in mostly digestive symptoms,
Mhm.
goat milk based infant formula may be better tolerated. And in a lot of areas of the world, it's used in many of these cases. There's a really great study that found that, and more than just one study, but there's emerging evidence somewhere between 40 to 100% of these babies, especially when they have conditions like food protein induced allergic procticulitis, which is when usually shows up as blood in the stool.
Mhm.
They can do really well on a goat
Hmm.
milk based infant formula thanks to the differences in the protein structure and the
Mhm.
fact that goat milk has lower allergenicity compared with cow milk. But, that being said, the diagnosis of non IgE mediated cow milk allergy is really tricky because we don't have a lab test to
Mm.
confirm it. We could just have careful symptom tracking and then a trial of elimination and reintroduction in order to have a concrete diagnosis. So, in my experience, it takes a good amount of clinical judgment on the part of the healthcare provider and
Mhm.
then also shared decision making with the family to figure out a course of action. And I was curious. I wanted to ask you about this. This is where a tool, an awareness tool like the COMIS or the cow milk related symptoms score can really help.
Mhm.
I was curious if you've
Mhm.
heard of this and if you're using it in your
I
practice.
have heard of it, but I'm not
Yeah.
using it in my practice because I'm not really seeing a lot of babies these days, but I
Yeah.
have heard of it. Tell us more about it.
It's so cool. I learned about it recently. It's been validated in Europe
Mhm.
and it's used a lot in research settings to help both healthcare providers, but also parents
Mhm.
recognize possible CMPA symptoms early on. And in studies, if you end up with a score above 12 that drops below 6 after dietary changes, that's been shown to predict CMPA with up
Hmm.
to 80% accuracy.
Wow.
So, and it's a survey. It's a set of questions. So hopefully, some of the healthcare providers in your audience, my my tween daughters say, just search it up. Is what
Ah.
what they're saying these days. You can search it up online. It's free
Yeah.
to use.
Do you know
Yeah.
what are some of the questions that it asks off the top
It,
of your head
It's
or
looking at symptoms. So it's looking
yeah.
at symptoms, it's looking at the timing.
Yeah.
So when the symptoms show up, and it's looking at what the symptoms are, what the severity is, how long
Mhm.
they've been around.
Mhm.
And it looks at all sorts of different symptoms that we could possibly attribute to CMPA. So it's very, very useful. And parents can use it too, not just the healthcare providers. Um,
Interesting.
so really interesting. But again, I want to be very clear. We need more research on which types of non-IgE mediated cow milk allergy cases would benefit most from a goat milk based infant formula
Mhm.
before we can make any sort of a generalized recommendation about using it. But in some cases, and always in partnership with your pediatrician, it can be a helpful option for babies with some types of non-IgE mediated CMPA. And this is really exciting for me because I'm deep in the world of food allergy prevention,
Mhm.
very excited about it. And if we can keep those dairy proteins in the diet in a way that's tolerated, this may offer a way to help keep these babies safely exposed to milk proteins in a
Mhm.
a gentler, more tolerable form, which could help prevent future IgE mediated allergy development during
Mhm.
infancy because that infant immune system is somewhat malleable during infancy, and it doesn't seem to like it when we introduce a potential allergen during infancy and then take it out of the diet.
Mhm.
So if we can keep those dairy proteins in a way that's safe and tolerable, that may be helpful to prevent IgE mediated allergies down the road.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, you talked about and mentioned importing formula from other areas like Europe, for example. And a lot of that came to fruition when we had the infant formula shortage. I hear um, sort of an exuberant acceptance of European formulas and European foods in general, right? I feel like there's no food dyes in European foods. That's not true. So it's is importing infant formula from the EU safe? Is it what should parents be thinking about if they are doing something like that? What's sort of your stance on that?
Yeah, I just had a conversation with a client yesterday about this. It's very common to believe that importing infant formula from Europe through whatever third party sellers is perfectly safe, and unfortunately, it isn't. Nor is it actually legal. But many people aren't aware of this, and I think they're thinking about I don't want to say the wrong things, but maybe not aware of the potential dangers associated with it.
Hmm.
And it's really common. I think there was a study that found that 14% of families reported illegally importing European infant formula, and that was in 2021. So and that's a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm.
Um, Here's why it's dangerous. Even though European formulas meet EU standards when they're purchased directly overseas, when they're brought into the US through some of these different unauthorized, unregulated sources, they completely bypass our FDA safety checks and the labeling reviews and the facility inspections, which means that we can't guarantee that the formula has been stored properly, that it hasn't been tampered with, or that it even contains the right nutrient levels when it finally reaches us here. Because if it's stored, in a very hot, let's say, shipping container, nutrient breakdown can happen.
Mm.
Or if there is a date, an expiration date on the package that we can't read because it's in another language, we may not know that.
Hmm.
Um, labels that aren't in English, even just the nutrient content, if that, or the directions on how to mix those formulas that can lead to mistakes in preparation. Um, Formulas in Europe that are called hypoallergenic, the hypoallergenic part means something different in
Mm.
Europe than it means here.
Hmm.
So, and further, European formulas follow a staging system, a staging system, and the nutrient levels like iron may not match US recommendations,
Mm.
which can be really confusing for parents too, especially if they're in another language.
Yeah.
Um, and then lastly, if there's a recall, and I was explaining this to the client yesterday because it was really weighing on my heart. What if there's a recall in Europe and you're buying through a third party seller? You
Hmm.
might never hear about it.
Right.
So it's really important to choose formulas that are FDA reviewed and approved for sale in the US market. Um, and if parents really want a goat milk based infant formula, there is only one, which is Cabrita. And it's the first and only European made and goat milk based formula that has fully completed the entire stringent FDA review process and meets all of the US nutritional and safety standards.
Mm. That's really a powerful statement. Closer to breast milk. We hear this as a marketing claim. And just to put it out there, all infant formulas are trying to get as close to breast milk as possible. That's the whole, like that is the whole journey for all of them. But for you as a pediatric dietitian, when we hear the words closer to breast milk, what does that really mean in terms of nutritional profile or any of the components that really matter for infant growth and development?
Yeah. I like to focus on three different areas when it comes down to the closeness, the proximity to breast milk.
Hmm.
Um, One important piece to consider is, we talked about the proteins. We talked about the ways that the
Hmm.
proteins are closer in structure to breast milk than cow milk. But another piece that's important to consider is the weight to casein ratio.
Hmm.
And in early breast milk, that ratio is around 90 to 10%. And that changes over time. In mature breast milk, it's closer to 60-40.
Hmm.
And I can speak to Caprita's goat milk based infant formula in terms of this weight to casein ratio. It's thoughtfully adjusted to match that 60-40 ratio,
Hmm.
which just helps make that protein composition easier to digest for infants, much like breast milk. But it's not just about the protein. We talked about the oligosaccharides, those special prebiotics
Hmm.
found in human milk that help support gut health, and how goat milk in general is naturally 5 times higher in oligosaccharides than cow milk. But that the feature that I think is a real standout in terms of its proximity to breast milk is the unique fat blend.
Hmm.
Um, Cabrita is the first and only U.S. infant formula to include SN2 palmitic acid, and it really is a special ingredient because it's not just that it mimics what's naturally found in breast milk. It's what research shows um, in terms of outcomes for the baby,
Hmm.
and when we're talking about potentially positive outcomes for the baby, absorption of more calcium and fat, softer stools, less
Hmm.
constipation, less crying, stronger bones, and even a potentially healthier gut microbiota. That's really exciting
Yeah.
because breast milk, we know that it does so much to shape a baby's microbiome. And that's one of the things we really want to try and mimic
Hmm.
when we're designing an infant formula
Yeah.
is something similar.
Yeah. Speaking to the fat blend, and just earlier on, you mentioned that plant based fats are added, and that's pretty common practice across the board in all kinds of infant formula. But if you're out on social media and you're listening to the wellness influencers, everybody is saying that plant based sources of fat, namely seed oils, are inflammatory. And we've heard things like inflamed babies, which folks out there listening, that's just not a thing. I'm sorry, but don't believe that. That's not a thing. Um, Fat has to be added to bring the total fat percentage up to the required levels for a baby's brain development. It's so incredibly critical. What do you have to say about these claims that, adding oils or fats to any infant formula, um, is something that is toxic or inflammatory? Or what do you have to say to that? Because this is a current conversation that's happening right now. I've been interviewed about it. I'm sure you have been as well. It's just it's relevant to our time right now.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much fear circulating about this topic.
Hmm.
And I mean, bottom line, there's fear circulating around it, I think, because it draws so many headlines and clicks and views and engagement, whether it's on social media or traditional media. And I would caution parents to think about that when they're thinking about topics that wellness influencers are putting out there. What is the goal of that piece of content for that influencer? Is it likes? Is it views? Is it engagement? Because this topic, we don't have any concrete scientific evidence that seed oils in infant formula are harmful for babies. They have been safely used in the US and in European formulas for decades
Yes.
without evidence of harm. And they provide this very affordable source of essential fatty acids like linoleic acid, which is also present in breast milk and which is critical for overall growth and healthy skin and many other important attributes. So, when fear mongering and clicks and views is the goal, that's a red flag to dive deeper into the science.
Hmm. Yeah. So let's get practical here at this juncture. And if a family wants to try a goat milk based infant formula, or they're considering using one, what should they look for on the label? And what assures them that it's nutritionally complete and safe for their baby?
Well, there's a really easy answer to that. And I mean, for goat milk based infant formula and for any infant formula sold in the US, it's important to choose one that's legally sold and that has gone through that FDA review process, because that process guarantees that nutrition and safety standards are going to be met and that that formula will contain what the babies need to thrive and grow.
Hmm.
Yes, there are minor differences between formulas, but if it's gone through that review process, then there are decades of research that are behind the recommendations that have decided what goes into that formula.
Hmm.
And then again, if you want a goat milk based option, the only way to guarantee that is to choose Cabrita, because it is the only right now goat milk based infant formula that's gone through that rigorous FDA review process.
Yeah. Any tips for making that switch go smoothly?
So if you're switching to a goat milk based infant formula, most babies have no issues transitioning quickly. Some can be more sensitive to changes in flavor or
Hmm.
to texture or to digestion. So it can help if your baby is sensitive to make the switch gradually
Hmm.
and just give the baby's palate time to catch up.
Hmm.
But that's easy to do. Just start by mixing small amounts of the goat milk based infant formula in with baby's current formula and then adjust that ratio slowly over time, over maybe several days, just to ease the transition.
Hmm.
And then, of course, I always like to mention, talk to your pediatrician before you make a change. Um, and just be in conversation with them to ensure they're on board with the transition and that whatever you're switching to is going to meet your baby's nutritional needs.
Yeah, good advice. What's the biggest misconception you encounter about goat milk based infant formula? And what do you wish every parent knew about it?
Oh, gosh. Well, one of the biggest misconceptions actually about infant formula in general that I hear is that it's only for babies who aren't breastfed. And the numbers just tell us that that simply isn't true. The reality is most families in the US use some formula, even if they start out exclusively breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm.
Um, According to the CDC, about less than 25% of babies are exclusively breastfed,
Mm-hmm.
and then more than half are combo fed with both breast milk and formula. So combo feeding is actually the most common way that
Mm-hmm.
babies are fed. So, as a pediatric dietitian, I want to support families in however they choose to feed, whether it's exclusive breastfeeding or combo feeding or formula feeding. It's the right choice if it works for the baby and if it works for the family. And this, as a medical advisor for Cabrita, this is something I really appreciate about the brand because they openly support all feeding journeys and very openly acknowledge that breastfeeding is the gold standard for
Mm-hmm.
infant nutrition. But we can also, two things can be true. We can also recognize that formula plays a really valuable role in helping families meet their baby's nutritional needs. And at the end of the day, every family deserves safe, nutritious options that support their baby's unique feeding journey.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. If there's a single message you'd like parents to walk away with regarding goat milk infant formula, goat milk based infant formula, what would it be?
I would love for parents to know that when it comes to infant formula feeding in general, they have safe, nutritious, FDA reviewed options available, many of them. And one of the ones that they have available is goat milk based infant formula, which is recognized by the AAP and the FDA as a viable choice from birth. So for newborns as well.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, Cabrita is the only goat milk based infant formula that's also European, that's sold in the US and fully meets all FDA safety and nutritional standards. And it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So it's an option going forward.
Awesome. Melina, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and teaching us all about goat milk based infant formula. For our listeners who want to learn more about formula feeding, you can download a free formula feeding excerpt from the best selling book, Baby 411, via the link in the show notes. So I will link this up in the show notes. And if you want to try Cabrita, you can now purchase it at Walmart. So you can go to walmart.com. Any other resources, or how can people get in touch with you, Melina, and Cabrita in general?
Yes, absolutely. So Cabrita.com is always a great place to go. You can always connect with me at Healthy Mom, Healthy Kids on Instagram or via my blog at melinamalkani.com/blog.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Melina. Always nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thanks for listening to the Nourish Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.